Hello, Happy New Year. This is Deborah Cohen in Atlanta, Georgia, coming to you with some thoughts for the new year to make this world a better place. And I thought that I would discuss today the issue of anti Semitism under the blanket of hate, which hate is the old root which causes all of this dissension and division. So let us jump right in today. If you want to find a quiet place to listen, contemplate, reflect, ponder, meditate, take notes, whatever you'd like, this would be a good time in the next 30 minutes or so. So let's talk about the hot off the press issue with Kanye West, who has changed his name to Ye, Y-E. And this is 2023. And I'm going to try to just ask questions because I don't understand why Kanye, who claims to be a Christian, would be full of hate. The first question I would ask if I were a Christian is, wait a minute, that's not the message that Jesus preached. Didn't he say there's one commandment to love one another as you love yourself? So something's not quite right. And so what I'm trying to get us to do is understand that people's words don't always match their behavior. And there can be people with credentials and PhDs and fame or whatever it is that gives people the clout to say one thing and actually do something else. And I think the word is called hypocrisy. But I'll let us think together about this in this new year to make this world a better place. So he says he's a Christian. So let's check out who he hangs with. That's one of the things you can do to try to see if what he says is really who he is or she is. Well, let's see. In October of 2022, he was on this Fox News broadcast, apparently, with one of his buds, Fuentes, somebody named Fuentes, Nick Fuentes, 24 years old. He is a white supremacist. Well, let's see. Doesn't that mean that white people that ascribe to this theology or belief, they think they're supreme? And so the question you want to ask is, does that go against the U.S. Constitution here in America, where it says all people are created equal? Or if you have a religious belief, doesn't that go against the teachings of Christianity? Why do I keep bringing up Christianity? Because Nick Fuentes, he prefers to be called a Christian conservative, rather than a white supremacist. Why? Because Nick was raised Roman Catholic. He hailed the recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling that overturned Roe versus Wade as the advent of a Catholic Taliban rule in a good way, and encourages other Christian nationalists to do the same. So he justifies being called a conservative Christian based on his Roman Catholic upbringing. Well, let's see. Again, does Catholicism say that it's my way or the highway? I think so, because I was raised Catholic. And Catholicism, like Islam, they believe if you're born into those two religions, you die into those two religions. So, it's kind of like a sect of who we claim to follow. We, meaning if you follow Catholicism or Islam, who is the God? Then we get to that question, which I had with a fellow believer this weekend. There are many gods. We know that from the Bible. But who is the one true and living God? Does that sound like something you've heard before? And if you are following the one true and living God, does your character line up with the attributes of the God you claim to follow? In the case of Yi and Nick, they say that there are only Christians who are like them. So does that mean they are a God with a small g? There are many gods. So are they the true God? You have to ask yourself all these questions. And I still don't know why Yi has this beef with Jews, because Christianity came out of Judaism. Who is here first, the chicken or the egg? Well, I'd say that Judaism was here before Christianity, and that is a fact. You can find that if you choose to study, okay? So why would Christians, any Christians, have anything against the Jews when, first of all, the one that they follow says to love one another? I don't remember JC saying only love people that are like me. No. So, and then if you are a Christian and you hate the Jews, how can you hate the Jews when your religion came from Judaism? Start to think about that. And maybe as a Christian, you want to read the Hebrew Bible in English, and then again, you're at the mercy of the translator, which is one of my pet peeves, which is why you have to learn Hebrew. I'm learning it. We all have to learn Hebrew. And eventually we'll all know the mother tongue of all the nations, the mother tongue being Hebrew, from the one true and living God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And in the case of Islam, they decided from Judaism that they would create a religion from the God of Abraham and Ishmael, because Abraham had two sons, and we know the story, hopefully you know the story of how Sarah got this dumb idea of having a child through her maidservant, Hagar, Egyptian maidservant, and Ishmael was born, and then the two women couldn't get along after that, Sarah and Hagar, so, Hagar had to leave with her son, and that started Islam, and I'm kind of generalizing, but you can see how all these splits, if you try to go back to the main seed, it's Abraham. We're all children of Abraham, and look how we're fighting with each other. And there's stories in the Bible about, land disputes. Read the Old Testament, as you call it in Christianity. We can learn from the Torah, all of us. All the religions, the main religions, borrow from the Torah anyway. So, and as a matter of fact, if you're a Christian listening, you must know that Jesus was a Jew, and he taught from the Torah. There was no New Testament when he was here. So you need to know that you're ascribing to somebody that teaches a book that you say is defunct. And ask yourself, does that make sense? No, it doesn't. So these two men, getting back to Yi and Nick, are afraid that America will cease to exist as a Christian nation, according to this article in ajc.org. If it loses its white demographic core, and if it loses its faith in Jesus Christ. So he's worried about becoming a minority. And we'll leave that here. So let's go. I want you to start thinking about questions. Okay. So I would think founding fathers. It's in print that this country is Judeo-Christian. So these two guys, Yi and Nick, don't acknowledge the Judeo part of a Christian nation. They're just calling it a Christian nation. And this is what happens, when people don't like each other. Over time, it erodes, the truth erodes away, and it becomes a new truth, which isn't the truth. Which is why I like to go back and look at the beginning of things. So what is Judeo? And of course, in our history, we know that many truths have been buried in history books and not the whole truth has been admitted. Getting back to Christopher Columbus, who some say was a Christian and started Christianity, but actually he was Jewish. And that might shock a lot of you to hear that, but yes, he was Jewish. And a lot of the things that the Puritans did were to honor Judaism. And let's talk about the founding fathers while we're at it. Let's see, were they all Christian? And if you read a traditional history book, you'll find out that no, they were deists. They believed in their own version of God, but at least they were able to get together on a piece of paper and create the Declaration of Independence and state one nation under God, whoever you understand God to be, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is the United States of America. This is the Constitution that we claim to ascribe to. One nation under God, not gods, but God. So you can get into a dispute about which God you are serving, and hopefully it's a God of love and not a God of hate. And Christianity is not a religion of hate. Judaism is not a religion of hate. Islam, the true Islam, may not be a religion of hate, but it's been perverted by the extremists. And we have extremists in all of these religions, which are the counterfeit. So you have to, as a human being, ask these questions to get to the truth, which has been buried through the years and the centuries of human beings who decide they don't like the way something is. And if they're in a position of authority, i.e. politicians, they can change the rules to suit them or hopefully to suit the people. We, the people, in a democratic United States. Okay. So let me see something about I was reading because I'm trying to understand the truth here. The United States was founded on Judeo-Christian values. Now let's just kind of look at we are now free. At the time it was written, the people were under the authority of a king, and legally the action taken by a king is by appealing to a higher authority than the king himself, in this case, God. Now, the most well-known sentence of the Declaration states, quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator, capital C, with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness," end quote. Now, this is a sentence which is a direct appeal to God that the King of England has stepped outside the boundaries of his divine right to rule, and they are invoking the name of God in order to legally accuse the king. So as you can see in the Declaration of Independence and the structure of the British government, the Founding Fathers appealed to God as a form of higher authority for their freedoms and inalienable rights. By stating that this in the Declaration, it's clear proof that they recognize God as an invaluable part of the founding of this country. Let's continue on. Let's take a breath so we can absorb all of this truth. Furthermore, the Founding Fathers even spoke of their Christian beliefs. They didn't just write them down. John Adams, a Founding Father, and President of the United States, stated, quote, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other," end quote. This is true because our Constitution, as well as the Declaration of Independence, was crafted by a religious people for a religious people. Okay, now, then we get into this lie about the separation of church and state, which is taught in public schools. It says that the, politicians can't, I always get this backwards, that because it's not taught right. The church can't get into the government. No, it's actually, it was written the opposite. This prevalent phrase, separation of church and state, it's an expression bound to be used whenever a religious conversation takes place. And you can see that I'm confused about it myself because I was brainwashed in public school to believe the wrong thing. And if it's taught by your school system that endorses this false doctrine, then of course you're going to believe it's true. Okay, however, it is often used without proper understanding of its origin, and this is about origins, meaning and purpose. Nowhere in our Constitution are these words ever used. Nowhere in our Constitution. Rather, they are found in a letter. Okay, so get this right in our head so we can share it with people. Oh, separation of church and state is not in the Declaration of Independence? No, it's not. It's found in a letter by Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptist Association. It was used by Jefferson in reference to the defense of the First Amendment, which prohibits government interference in religious activities. Whoa, what? That's not what I was taught in public school. Let me read it again. Let me make sure I heard it right. It prohibits government interference in religious activities. Then separation of church and state does not refer to the church staying out of the government, but instead means that the government must stay out of the church. Get that in our heads. I'm still trying to get it in my head from years of being brainwashed as a child in the public school. It means, it does not mean that the church stays out of the government. But according to our declaration, it means that the government must stay out of the church. Whoa. Wow. Amazing. Okay. So, Thomas Jefferson was like Adams, a man of religion. Therefore, naturally, he would agree with Adams that a government bound by adhering to a moral code was absolutely necessary for the governing of a religious mind. With this in mind, it would seem entirely illogical to assume that the Founding Fathers meant that the church had no place in the government. It is for these reasons that one is able to clearly see that our great nation was founded on Judeo-Christian values. All right, so let's get to the Judeo part, getting back to the religion of our Founding Fathers. And we already established, or in public school textbooks, we know that our nation, the United States, was founded in deism. The fathers they had their own little beliefs. But where does the Judeo come from? Well, like I said earlier, a lot of things get buried when people have prejudices or hatred or bias. And so it's coming out of the archives that were intentionally buried about Jews, that the American founding father, Alexander Hamilton, 1745 to 1804, was born and raised as a Jew. There you have it, people. There's one example, and there's more truth coming out as people have the courage to pursue the truth of this country founded in Judeo-Christian, not just Christian according to Yee and Fuentes, but Judeo, meaning Jewish Christian values. And also ask yourself, Judeo-Christian, because Christianity was a sect of Judaism. Okay, Alexander Hamilton was born and raised as a Jew, according to an Oklahoma University assistant professor of law, Andrew Porwancher. Okay? It's a program called Early America and the Jews. And I'm going to scroll down for sake of time. Hamilton's mother, Rachel, had been married to a man named Johann Levine on the Danish-controlled Caribbean island of St. Croix before commencing her relationship with Hamilton's father, James, on the British-controlled island of Nevis, and young Alexander had attended Nevis's Jewish school. However, previous historians have dismissed the possibility that Alexander Hamilton might have been Jewish, arguing that Johann Levine was not described in Danish records as a Jew, that Rachel Levine herself was never Jewish, and that Hamilton had only attended a Jewish school because his illegitimate birth disqualified him from being baptized and from attending a Christian school. But Porwancher was not convinced. He says, I've always thought that Alexander Hamilton was Jewish, because if not, he would have to be the first person in history whose mother was named Rachel Levine and who went to a Jewish school, but who wasn't Jewish. And we know that's ridiculous. But his hypothesis was driven more than intuition. He noticed a curious dearth of evidence in the footnotes where previous generations of historians had denied Hamilton's Jewish connection. And if you want to know more about this, you can go to blogs.yu.edu. Okay, so we're finding out the truth or the truths in the Happy New Year 2023, because we need to sift through the media to find out what people are really saying. You don't want to believe everything you hear when a person like Yi and Fuentes say they're Christians, conservative Christians, but they hate Jews or they hate whoever. You got to ask yourself the question, why do they call themselves a Christian if they hate other people? Because the foundation of Christianity, according to Jesus Christ, is to love one another, meaning everybody. You need to ask these questions because if you start believing everything you hear, you'll end up being confused. and we need to seek the truth, people. That's all I'm trying to do is the God that was the founding fathers were able to get together a group of deists who all had their own understanding of who God is, were able to come together and write a Declaration of Independence for the United States based on Jewish and Christian principles. And that makes sense because, okay, so you don't believe the same as me about the same God. That makes sense because if you start to study the Torah and you understand the teachings of Judaism, that not everybody receives revelation knowledge of divine, we'll call it divine revelation, at the same time, the same pace. Human beings all learn at different paces, different levels. So you need to respect where somebody is at in their beliefs. And our purpose is to help each other grow. You love one another. It starts within. We all have sparks of God within us. We have the breath of God giving us life. And there's no sense arguing with each other about who we think God really is. That's, what do they call that? Fundamentalism. And, it happens that when you get into a doctrine of men, that you start to get brainwashed. And I've been there, so I know. I'm talking from experience. And you start to believe that you have the truth and nobody else does. And this causes hatred, division, and that's not what God is about. The God of Israel, the God, the Creator, capital C, that is written about in the Declaration of Independence. So suspend your opinion about whether somebody is right or wrong. get a listening ear. This is the key to learning to grow together, to listen to what they have to say without wanting to correct them, without spewing hatred, without saying you're wrong and I'm right. And, wisdom teaches us to hold your tongue, say as few words as possible, smile, and try to be together, find something to be together about. That's good, that's moral, that's righteous. Okay, so I'm trying to find the truths about Judeo-Christian country that we live in. And I think that because we're running out of time on this week of A Story and a Song, I'm going to end with a song that I wrote a couple years ago. It's called People, and it's about unity. So let us, in our hearts, no matter what your understanding of the God, everybody has their own belief in who God is. But we read the Torah because the God, the Creator, gave us a manual to live by, the principles of humanity, where we can live together in respect for one another, in peace, and abolish hatred by teaching others. So we have to educate ourselves, like I'm trying to do, and go out into the school systems or into the churches or into the synagogues or into the mosques or wherever, and let your light that God has given to you and to me shine. Grab a hold of a truth so that you're able to get to the point of teaching it, and just share what little you know in love, in finding the gifts that God has given to you to wrap that truth around and share it, and share the goodness of life, the light of God. And so I'm going to close with this song that I wrote. This is my way of sharing the truth.
We are the people of the human race. Look at your brother now living in disgrace. Do you give him a hand from where on earth you stand? We all have needs in this disunity. People point fingers at their enemies, thinking of hurting one birth from the same seed. They justify the pain for evil, selfish gain and call it prejudice against their dirty deeds. People, people, people. The kingdom come, let's get together, together in love, together in love. Crooked politicians wear a crafty smile, fabricated apathies accepted as in style, play one against the other, divided we can't stand, as one together played by their slippery hands. People, people, people. Together as one, Lay down your burden, the kingdom come, let's get together. Together in love. Let's put our hearts together as one. Lay down your burden, the kingdom come, let's get together.